about the diverse ideas that are coming together, and indeed that tees us up really nicely for our first panel of the day. It's going to be entitled Ahead of the Curve. Now we're going to be talking, as we've heard already, about those strategic investments, of course original innovation, thriving business ecosystems, and of course robust labour pools as well. They have catapulted nations from humble origins to rising stars. However, they've got to navigate those global economic headwinds marred by escalating crises. So how will these dynamic economic powerhouses take the lead in addressing the world's most pressing challenges before time runs out? The next panel is entitled Ahead of the Curve, the next gen economic powerhouses, the growth and the challenges that they face. So I'd love to welcome to the stage our panelists today. We have Susanna Hargitay, the Managing Director of SME Finance and Development at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD. During her 30 years at the EBRD, she has spearheaded efforts to support, of course, those all-important SMEs from the various countries. We have Takashi Maruyama, the Chief Investment Officer of Asset Management One. Please come on to the stage. Ranked among the top 10 CIO in Asia 2023, overseeing a global team of over 300 investment professionals. And Bharat Shah, the Executive Director of Ask Investment Managers, who's a highly respected figure in the Indian equity markets. Again, 34 years of stock picking and investing experience. Our moderator for this session is Shane Tejarati, the Chairman of VS Partners and co-founder of the Superbridge Council. And he is the CEO and Chairman of Tribridge Group as well, the global investment firm solving 21st century challenges. Shane, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. What a great start to this second Superbridge. When we talk about Global South, a lot of people think in terms of China, India, maybe Latin America. Today, we want to bring three regional focuses to the discussions of the Global South and Global East. We're going to be, with our distinguished panels, talk about obviously the region of Japan, which in many ways people don't think of it as an emerging economy, but we'll talk a little bit about Japan, what are the challenges going on in Japan, and the opportunities that exist for investors and for innovators and for scientists for Japan. Everyone is talking about India these days because India has been on the platform for well over 20 some years, but many people say the time for India has finally arrived, especially given what's going on with the global geopolitics, that India really is the next emerging market in the world, driving innovation and growth. We want to talk about India a little bit. Perhaps the spotlight is not as much on emerging Europe and Central Asia. So today we also have Susanna to talk about what's really going on in emerging Europe, in Eastern Europe, in countries of Central Asia, and what are some of the dynamics there. So as you had heard, the background of our panelists are uniquely suited for this. I'm going to start from my immediate left with Takashi-san to give each panelist 2 or 3 minutes to just set the scene for your regions. And then we'll continue from there. Maybe we start that with Takashi-san.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Takashi Maruyama, Chief Investment Officer of the Asset Management, came from Tokyo, Japan. It's my privilege to speak the distinguished guest to this Superbridge. I'd like to tell you the most important thing about what's going on in Japan right now. That's the main reason about Japan economic stagnation. Conventional view, according to the conventional view, that is like a Japanese demography, right? But we don't think It is the main reason. The main reason is lack of like a capital input. I will tell you about it a little bit. Simply speaking, in the past, like Japan's economy will not grow unless the population increase. Right? That is many people thought that. But recently, like more and more people are supporting a different view. That is, demography is not like a main reason for Japan's economic stagnation. Like Charles Goodhart, like argued that point when he published Great Demographic Reversal in 2000. I think like many of you like read that book, but some experts said again like the main reason is like a lack of capital input. Precisely speaking, in the last 30 years, many Japanese companies like expanded foreign direct investment. I mean like outward foreign direct investment from Japan to overseas, but they did not like deploy enough capital to the domestic like investment. As a result, capital vintage in Japan are the second oldest in the G7 country after Italy. And like in addition, Japan like inward foreign direct investment balance, inward from like overseas to Japan, inward foreign direct investment balance as a percentage of nominal GDP is around 5%. This is unbelievable, like fourth ranked from the bottom among 200 countries for which the data is publicly available according to the UN, like United Nations data. So that lack of the capital input like contribute to the Japan stagnation significantly, and that is an issue to be fixed. Then finally, Japanese government and Japan society recognize this is a problem, and right now, Japan try to open the country to welcome the lot of like a foreign direct investment into Japan from overseas, not only for like a capital, but also like talent, idea, and so on. So that is, I think, like most important thing for the Japan, for the audience, I think. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Takashi-san. We're going to come to that because I think everybody in the audience wants to also understand what are given that dynamic, what would be the greatest opportunities that they could look to Japan. Well, on the opposite side of the scale, perhaps, is India. There's a lot of buzz about India. So maybe Bharat Shah, I'll give you the floor for a few minutes. Give us a quick tour of what are some of the highlights, what are some of the dynamics, and of course, we'll prod that more.
Yeah. Good morning to everybody. I mean, all of us, I presume, are investors in this gathering. So as investors, we all know among the most critical parameters which are at the root of value creation. And I want to link it to the India's situation today. So if I put three key critical parameters, growth, secondly, aspects which make growth pervasive, which is predictability of growth, durability of growth, and resilience of the growth to the challenges. And finally, the quality of growth, the capital efficiency, return on capital employed, return on equity, moats in the business, and all of that. So if I have to put these three critical parameters, which are at the root of value creation, in my opinion, India is at a point of dramatic inflection in terms of its journey ahead. And I would believe the journey has just begun, even if a lot of people seem to think that a lot has already happened in India over the last 4 to 5 years. But if you look at the deep reforms which have been put in place, and these reforms are deep, interconnected, and they are in multifarious areas, and therefore reforms are becoming like an ecosystem, self-perpetuating kind of a cycle driving the growth higher. whether that is in physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, whether in digitization, technology embrace, cleaning up of the structure of the economy and all of that. The reforms, they become deeply embedded, and that's driving the growth and make it a self-perpetuating cycle. Second, because of the many important reforms which have happened, I would say not only the growth rate of India going ahead is going to be the highest by its own history, but highest compared to probably any other economy in the world for a length of time. But very importantly, I think the growth is more predictable because of the set of reforms which have happened and the nature of the reforms. It is also more durable. Therefore, growth doesn't happen to be a chance or an accident, but something which you can predict and which will sustain. And very importantly, the building blocks which are built and the confidence which has been created in the businesses and in the character of the economy, whereby the growth is resilient to deal with the challenges. A perfect example of that would be the way India managed COVID, the way India has managed a very tricky situation of Ukraine and Russia war, which ideally, which was probably set up to create maximum difficulty for India if one were to look at it. But the way India has dealt with it and converted that into an advantage is a fantastic leadership as well as resilience of the economy to deal with the challenges. And finally, the capital efficiency. Last year, for the first time, return on equity and return on capital employed in India in the corporate segment has emerged #1 in the world. That medal always belonged to America for decades, but for the first time, the trophy has gone to India last year, and I think it is only a beginning to my mind. Also, if you look at balance sheets, both of the lenders and borrowers today is never more healthy than what it is today. And that's very critical for a long-term sustainable growth. Debt equity ratio of India has gone down to half what it was pre-COVID in 5 years' time, while India has grown massively during this period, despite 2 years lost in the COVID. And third, if you look at the cost of capital has declined sharply, which again is setting the stage for the value creation process to be enhanced. And therefore, when I combine the reforms and what it is driving in terms of the growth, making growth more embellished and well-founded with greater predictability, durability, and resilience, and finally, the quality of growth becoming superior with capital efficiency rising, balance sheets becoming healthier, and the cost of capital decline. I would say India is at a stage of one of the longest periods of economic expansion in its history. Last point I would make, it is not merely about growth. India is very, very determined to set standards in innovation and leadership in the research and idea generation capability. Of course, it's a long-term process, but very, very strong beginnings have been made. To give you one example, in STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, India last year emerged as the 4th largest filers of the papers in the world in STEM. In 6G telecom technology, India is already emerged as the 4th largest player in the world in terms of the patents registered. So I'll just rest it there. So it's growth as well as innovation which is going to drive the progress of the country ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to come back to some of the things that you mentioned, Mr. Shah. Let's go to emerging Europe and Central Asia. Perhaps some of the emerging European countries are well known to people, but perhaps some of the others in Central Asia are less known. Susanna, please give us a maybe 2 or 3 minutes overview of what you see as both opportunities and challenges.
Thank you very much. EBRD, the acronym, stands for a Multilateral Development Bank. So I'm paid to be brave. We are on the frontier markets, and we have been present in in Eastern Europe for the last 30 years. And the two countries that come to my mind, 2+1, two that are already members of the European Union, Poland, that basically quadrupled its GDP in 30 years. Romania, that has always had the potential and is now picking up in development. And the third one, if you want me to mention, is Serbia, which is what the terminology calls. It's an accession country on the long road towards membership in the European Union. Poland is still our number 4 investment country. So invest around $1 billion in a country which is a developed middle income country. And what drives the development and what drives our investments is investment in green technology, a lot of renewables, and there are a lot of very robustly growing local companies with a very strong R&D component. In Serbia, it's almost the same, except that there are more investments in infrastructure. In all these 3 countries, the differentiation in terms of the growth and the growth potential will be, well, what we call today's ingredients of a cocktail. One is that has been mentioned, and it's linked to what you were saying about reforms, institutions, and I'm not that clever as that. We have held this value very close to our heart. Today, somebody got a Nobel Prize for it. Economic Nobel Prize for institution strength being one of the key ingredients of growth. Human capital comes next, and education, health, and in all these countries, there is increasing emphasis on investment in this, especially the combination of education and continuous learning and skills. And last but not least, again, has been mentioned, innovation and digitalization. Now, the region to be discovered, I don't have to talk here to a lot of audience that comes from the Gulf countries of Saudi, because I met them in Central Asia, and the country that comes to my mind, and it should be on your map, is Uzbekistan. With a flabbergasting growth in that country, with a lot of investment already from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries there in various sectors. To be continued.
Thank you. Susanna, you have the mic, so I'm going to start from that side, coming down. You mentioned, of course, the Poland, Romania, and Serbia, and of course, many of the other Eastern European countries have always been a little bit more subservient, a little bit behind the curve. In Central Asia, there's a lot of opportunities, especially vis-a-vis the investments that are coming from here and investments that are coming from China. But there's also a lot of challenges. You know, they're basically landlocked countries that are sandwiched between China and Russia. Despite these challenges, despite both the infrastructure challenges and geopolitical challenges, what are some of the other bright spots for investors in places like Kazakhstan, in Turkmenistan, in former Silk Road countries or future Silk Road countries?
I spent the last 3 years in Central Asia, so I'm speaking very much from on-the-ground experience. Look, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they stand out because of the size of the country and the population. And yes, the mineral wealth is there. It is there also for the new industries. So again, in both countries, a lot of emphasis is put on opening up further the mining sector for investments. In Uzbekistan, if my latest news are correct, then it will be this autumn that they will adopt the new mining law. In both countries, there have been, or they are solidly building up their institutions. Still, for foreign investors, dialogue with the government and with the presidents of this country, a strategic dialogue is key and can be held. So you have receptive and perceptive counterparts for those investments. The two different countries, they struggle, as you said, being what I tell my shareholders time and again, and my shareholders are governments, they're sandwiched between Russia and China. And their diversification potential is to Afghanistan and Iran. And that poses certain challenges. They have been building up steadily their infrastructure because they have to get access to markets also beyond these two large countries, and inviting also other investors. And there will be continued investment into I know that when we talk about Silk Road, we always use singular, but there used to be Silk Roads. Yes. So alternatives are being built across the Caspian Sea, through the Caucasus, to reach the Black Sea ports. And this is one of the strategic directions there. Again, especially in these two countries, the leadership pays a lot of attention to diversification of inflow of foreign direct investment, but also the outflow of their products that they can export.
Correct. Well, one of the most memorable trips that I've ever made was to Turkmenistan when we laid out the pipeline between Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all the way to India. And I think that this outward reaching of these regions, because of their particular richness in resources, provides tremendous opportunities for infrastructure investment, for technology investment, cybersecurity, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Shah, you talked about growth. You talked about reform in India. Many continue to be concerned about infrastructure. If India, obviously India is a very diverse economy, and we talked about that before. There are many, many different sectors in India. It's a much more balanced economy than, say, China is in terms of just focused on mostly on manufacturing, and now China has, of course, diversified into all kinds of different areas. But if we were going to actually get real about global manufacturing in India, what are some of the reform areas that would address the infrastructure challenges in India? Land reform, perhaps ports, seaports, transportation, etc.
75 years since independence, 1947. In last 10 years, India has built more roads than what it has built in the previous 65 years. 10 years back, India had 74 airports. Today, India has got 153 airports. So more than doubled what it has done in the previous 65 years. Port capacity in India is increased by 120% in last 10 years compared to what it existed. Apart from the size of the change in the infrastructure, what is even more remarkable is the quality of the new infrastructure which is built, which is at a scale, at a class, and of a standard and quality which is absolutely world class. If you look at in energy, one of the burning topics all around, India is at the forefront of transition of energy from the conventional to the green energy. Even though India is hungry for energy given its growth rate, and therefore in next 7 years, India is aiming to build 500,000 megawatt of new green energy infrastructure. And it is well on its way to achieve that. The fastest transition that anybody else, any other economy in the world is doing. Therefore, I think manufacturing ecosystem is a larger issue to be built over a period of time. China has been very dominant there, and for some very peculiar and specific reasons pertinent to China. But without going into that, I would say India is moving very purposively to build alternative supply chains in the world. And not just at a bottom of the pyramid kind of manufacturing, but across the board in various areas where it will make a difference. And I think world also is very keen to have alternate supply chains of a credible supplier which can be relied upon. And I think India is intelligently, strategically, and in a right way taking steps, promoting entrepreneurship to do that, but achieve the outcomes for the world. But all of that is a journey, and it's not at a point of time. So that's where we are on the...
Thank you. Thank you. Takashi-san, you mentioned one of the biggest challenge, and you kind of tried to bring a very different perspective, that just the aging of Japan is not its biggest challenge, but that foreign direct investment and attracting investments And shame on me, I did not know that Japan is in the bottom 4 in the world. What is going to be different in the next 5 years if Japan wants to change that dynamic with respect to attracting foreign direct investment? If you could name 2 or 3 things that is coming to your mind.
I think like most important challenge in Japan right now is the kind of lack of innovation. Unfortunately, a Japanese company has a business model of the growth of the Japan is when a Japanese company has been successful in Japan, basically they export that a business model to the all over the world, but that's it, right? And more and more depth, a type of a business, unfortunately could not take place. So, but maybe more a collaboration or co-work with international community or talent and ideas and of course capital. I think will give a big sea change in Japan. Actually, in addition to a foreign direct investment issue, right now in Japan, shareholder capitalism activity is becoming really active in Japan. Actually, the number of the activity is in the second after the United States. So, and these type of dynamics is taking place in Japan. So I think getting back to your original question, next 5 years, we can see a lot of signal of a change in Japan.
Very good. We got 3 minutes to the end of this session. I think you've all given us a lot of food for thought about the regions and probably a lot more opportunity to interact during the sessions. But I wanted to give maybe, again, 30 seconds to each of you. If for investors, for innovators, for people in this room and beyond, if you had to give 1 or 2 areas of that they should be thinking about when they think about your regions, what would they be? I'm going to start with Susanna.
Let me give it a 5-second thought. Look, you asked me about Eastern Europe and Central Asia, although we are present also in Turkey and elsewhere.
Yes.
I would keep my eyes on 3 things. Number 1 is investment in infrastructure that is still there, and there is potential and there is readiness to accept private investment there for a good return. You've got very strong governments in the countries I have also mentioned, so focusing that is a winner. One would need to see still government debt issuance as these countries' credit ratings are improving. So this is one area. The second area I can't help mentioning when I talk about Central Asia is access to critical raw material. Untapped resources, yes, the lead times are long, from exploration to exploitation, but these are still vast untapped resources, so anybody who would like to diversify the sources should look at that. And number 3, there is a market there. It's a small market. It's only 80 million people, but with access, different type of access to the neighboring markets as well. So manufacturing, in particular, in Uzbekistan is something that I know that on many people's mind, any type of things. Last but not least, there is openness in these countries in all to invest in education, including through public-private partnerships for a return. So these are areas that I would recommend to keep an eye on.
Awesome. I've worked extensively in these countries, and I second it. It takes a lot of nuance to get the growth, but once you're there, there's a lot of opportunity. Mr. Shah, 30 seconds.
I couldn't really get the question that you were asking.
Well, give us, if you want to leave an impression it could be one word, it could be one sentence, of what should the investors be really excited about in India today?
Well, I already mentioned, I think sheer growth rate, which is distinguished, and I think which will prevail and persist for a very long period of time, in my opinion. Very importantly, apart from the rate of growth, the quality of the growth in terms of capital efficiency, doing things in a durable way, sustainable way, these are distinguishing aspects of Indian growth. I would say, in terms of the governance, probably India is one of the best markets today. I'm making that statement very, very consciously, keeping in mind the standard of governance prevalent in, let us say, in America, in Europe, and in many other parts of the world. And I'm making that statement very consciously. I would say today the best regulator of banking in the world probably is in India. He has been officially rated so. Dr. Das of Reserve Bank of India has been rated as the best banker of the world. I would also say the best regulator of the securities and capital markets also, in my opinion, India has got today. So we have two outstanding regulators in there. And I think very importantly, the leadership. I think it is leadership of the country which has got us where we are, to ignite that power, to ignite that confidence and self-belief. And therefore, all of these are combining together to convert challenges into opportunities and convert opportunities into mega opportunities.
Thank you. Takashi-san, you get to say one sentence, one word. What impression do you want to leave our investors about Japan in the next 5 years?
Next 5 years about Japan. One word?
Yeah.
In Japan. I think Japan is finally changing. Like to use like foreign direct investment and like shareholder capitalism, and but at the same time, Japan like advantage is I think like stability. Like right now in the all over the world, they're transitioning from like a globalization to like kind of the uncertainty, like where different values being like reflected. So like a combination of these three will like attract.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very thankful to our panelists for bringing the highlights of these regions. Of course, there's a lot more nuance to them, but I think we look forward to the next reform in the next 5 years in Japan. We look forward to incredible continued growth and innovation in India, and of course, keeping an eye on both Central Asia, Turkey, and Eastern Europe, the nuanced geographies that are going to give us tremendous alpha. Please give a warm round of applause to our panelists. Thank you.